What do you build? Do you enjoy?
Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Do not try this at home.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for making the time. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to be here.
I was looking forward to this one. Hey, do we have this on widescreen, Kobe? Shout out to Ben Miller over here. Ben, stand up, boy. You got him? You can see him on the widescreen? There we go. Sorry we don't have a mic for you, Ben. I'd totally get you in on this. What's it like to have Patrick as your dad? I guess you can't really talk, but...
Got a
thumbs up. That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you came along, man. This is fun.
I thought he might enjoy the conversation.
Absolutely. Patrick and Alan, two of my closest friends. Thanks for coming by. I thought for episode 100, like there would be nothing more fun for me than just have you guys on and talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Love it.
I really appreciate you guys, both of you.
I'm honored.
Respect the crap out of you.
I think we were talking about it before. I think we've only got together like 3 times.
I was trying to remember when the last time was. Was it at Kent's on your back porch?
I didn't know you guys ever met.
Yeah. Well, we met originally years ago at the Wintex office.
Okay, yeah, I remember
Long
that.
time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe once or twice after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like the way you guys think. I like what you guys think about. I like how you guys both communicate what you're thinking about. And so
I don't
as
know.
we discussed, I don't have anything prepared here. So whatever you guys want to talk about.
Well, I don't know
I'm
you
game
all that
for.
well, and I don't know what you think about much, so I'd be curious what it is you're thinking about.
Right? Yeah.
Good place to start.
All right. I guess background. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it since we've had a couple about that, but
Yeah. Tell them a little about yourself. Or what you think about. You're always thinking about something.
I'm a
You
big
think about
thinker.
big pictures type stuff.
I feel like I live in the clouds probably more than I should. Definitely. But yeah. Pretty much these days, just I'm a glutton for punishment when it comes to entrepreneurship, and like next thing you know, I'm trying to start this business and that business, which most of it revolves around real estate these days. But yeah,
What are you doing right now? What are you starting?
so I have I have a real estate team. That's my day job. So we sell real estate, primarily. I say
Sell
primarily.
a crap ton of real estate is what you do.
Yeah. Well,
Every
try
every
to.
time I call him, he's at the closing table making money.
Come on.
we should write about 20 to 25 million this year, hopefully.
Wow.
So,
Good job.
yeah.
Congrats.
Then we got we launched a new investment company last year, Prestige Holdings. So
Okay.
right now what we're primarily doing is buying and flipping homes. So we have I think I counted 5 properties right now, something like that.
And those are all flips? You're not holding any of that?
Well, with Prestige, I have 4 with Prestige. I have 1 with my brother. Then me and my brothers, we have a development company, or we're developing some property into townhomes. So we're getting that through zoning now. We're hoping to start construction on some townhomes, hopefully in 3 months.
Mount Juliet?
No, this is actually Smith County.
Smith County.
Smith County is where we're buying it.
He recently stopped CrossFit. Can you believe that? Dude, this dude
on
was into
purpose?
CrossFit for a couple of years.
Look. I still pay my CrossFit bill,
do you
unfortunately. No, okay. So I'm a big believer in habit hacking and knowing your weaknesses. And I know that for me, I'm a creature of habit. And so it's, how CrossFit is. I love CrossFit, but you have to be like at the 4:00 spot or the 5:30 and boom, boom, boom. With my schedule so crazy, I never know what my day is going to be. And if I miss one, so what I do now is I go every morning, I drop off my son at school and go straight to the gym. So get to spend about an hour and a half there.
A different gym, so not CrossFit?
I'm going to a gym, just not a CrossFit.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
You going to cancel your subscription soon? Or
I need
what?
to.
Okay.
I need to. I love the people there.
I know.
What kind of programming what are you focused on?
My brother-in-law has been training me. I can't remember what it's called. It's a 5 day a week, one of those programs.
Mostly free weights?
Yeah, barbell. There's some cable. I get. I don't even know the lingo.
Anytime your brother-in-law is like your trainer, that's a cautionary flag, like a red flag goes up my mind. Really?
Well,
is he an actual trainer, or is he just your brother-in-law?
So
What's going on
he
with
has
that?
a personal training degree, And
okay.
he's a massage therapist, so he knows like
okay.
everything about it.
Okay, I see that.
And he's pretty jacked himself, and he wants to get into the real estate game. And I said, I'll tell you what, you train me and you make me look good, and I'll make
like
you a lot
that.
of money.
Yeah.
So we're I'm training him in the real estate game, and he's training me in the body game.
I like it. You're totally into CrossFit, aren't you, Kent?
I'm getting more and more into CrossFit. What I'm getting into recently is CrossFit as a sport, because I've been part of, ever since we moved to Nashville in 2014. That's when I first joined CrossFit Gym, but I did it for functional fitness. And just in the last couple months, I've gotten more into CrossFit as a sport. It's a legit sport. It's one of the things I think people don't understand when they're like, well, I go to this gym, so, it's one of the things people don't understand between gyms and CrossFit. Gyms is not a sport.
Right.
Planet Fitness and all these, they're gyms. They're fine. You're going to get out of it what you put into it, but it's not a sport. CrossFit's a sport. Like, there's legit athletes. There's a program. There's competition. There's a season.
I mean, we're getting into that season right now.
We're
We got
right
the
in that
CrossFit
season,
Open.
and I'm having more
Right.
fun following the season and following the sport now.
Are you in the Open?
I'm not, because of my back. So
Okay.
I hurt my back pretty bad 3 times in 2 months, about like the end of the year, beginning of this year. And it was so bad the third time I went to see a physical therapist for the first time. And I went 3 times. Totally fine, no pain now, but he said I need to take it easy until May 1. That was one of the things I was doing wrong, was just going too hard too soon. Fortunately, I don't have any signs of like long-term back injuries, but there's probably a bulged disc back there. And so he gave me 3 stretches that I'm doing every day, and I need to take it easy until May 1. And so I'm doing that, but just in the last 2 weeks, I'm pain-free again, being able to do all the movements, push hard. I can't do like front squats and back squats, but toes to bar, other stuff, I can go as hard as I want, and it feels really good.
It's been fun to watch Ben get into CrossFit. He plays football, so he's going to be a starting offensive line. He's going to be he's a rising junior. So
What's a rising junior
So
mean?
he's going to be in 11th grade this fall.
Gotcha.
So he's been doing the football workouts every
What
morning.
does the rising part mean? That's what I didn't understand.
That's what they go.
He's
going
In
into
between.
11th
Got it.
grade.
Yeah,
So,
you're in between
I mean,
your
we're
soft-
near the end of this. Kind of nearing the end of this school year and looking at the next. But so like his football program now is working out every morning at 6 a.m. at the school gym, going to, but then in the evening and weekends, he joins us at CrossFit. And that's been fun to see. It's been fun to do that workout with him.
Well, he's man, I wish we had a mic for you, Ben, but is he still closing the gym on Open Gym?
Yeah, he's hosting the Sunday Open Gym. It's cool. You get paid to work out, basically.
It's very cool. So speaking of CrossFit as a sport, did you know we have a really legit team in town?
Here in Nashville?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Bro, Tia Claire Toomey's training at a CrossFit East Nashville right now.
Is she really?
So
I
was-
thought she was out at Cookville with those guys.
So
Froning.
she was for a while. She was with Froning, and then she was training with Matt Frazier for a while. Frazier just retired. And she just about 2 weeks ago came through. I think she was in some other country or something, came back to Nashville. And so Shane Orr is the head coach. Shane Orr was coaching Tia Claire Toomey and Matt Frazier.
I see.
Matt Frazier was the fittest man on earth 5 years in a row.
He's a beast.
Tia Claire Toomey
Crazy.
was the fittest woman on earth 4 years in a row, and Shane Orr was coaching them both. And they're right here in Nashville. And then Alex Smith, Street Horner, and then they have a third guy who is still in Australia that's on the Proven team. But legit, they're right here in Nashville. This is pretty exceptional. So I think just having them in town, and at our gym, CrossFit Forte, there's a physical therapist there, Be Ready Fitness. They're starting to get, like Street Horner was in there like 2 hours ago getting something done on his back. Yesterday, Alex Smith was in there getting dry needling. At my gym.
Is that
Like these-
that's in your gym?
This guy might win the CrossFit Games this year.
That's pretty cool.
And
That's
he's getting
incredible.
physical therapy done at my gym. So, I mean, it's pretty stinking sweet.
That is cool.
And if they keep the commitment, Saturday morning, we've got 2 of their coaches, not Shane Orr, but Nick Johnson and Dwight Upshaw, 2 of the Proven coaches, going to be here on this podcast.
Whoa, nice.
That's awesome,
Bro,
That's
they're-
awesome.
They are one step away from like the fittest man and the fittest woman on earth.
That's
and not even one step away. They're training. Like they are making the fittest human on earth, and they're right here in Nashville.
Love it.
It's crazy.
No wonder you're stoked about it.
Right?
I'm so stoked about it. It's just the culture of CrossFit, the environment, the way these people are. They're just fun loving, kind of
That-
super fit. It's just a really great sport.
That's what I always loved about CrossFit. I mean, I've always said that there is a bonding experience that comes from shared suffering, and I mean that's
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what CrossFit is. And I think
sure.
that's the magic of CrossFit. Like everybody loves to come into the gym and bitch about how bad the workout was, right?
Yes.
I mean that, and there's a sense of community that comes out of that. So there's that aspect I miss incredibly. The thing that I had a challenge was because I was not consistent, I was not seeing the gains in which I needed. You know what I mean?
I got
like,
a saying about that. It's like for a long time I went to CrossFit just often enough to make it suck every time.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
suck maximally
Yeah.
every time.
But
That's
now,
what you
now
don't
that I'm
wanna
actually
do.
doing it 5 days a week and I have a program and I have somebody watching me and training me, like, you know, I'm making 50-pound gains every, 3 weeks, you
Yeah.
know, and so, obviously whenever you're as low as I am, you can go nowhere up, but I mean, if I was in a place where I could be as consistent as I wanted to, yeah, I would definitely go back.
Yeah. It's been interesting to watch CrossFit, the organization, transition through. They had a real crisis last year.
Yeah, they did.
Going into COVID, of course, Greg Glassman, the founder, had got himself in trouble with, running his mouth and kind of got the whole brand almost, there's people running from that brand like,
There was,
rats fleeing a ship. It was
Yep.
pretty rough. And then it was interesting to watch the guy who bought it, Eric Rosa. Are you familiar with him
I'm
at all?
not.
Okay, I think he comes from the data. He was an successful entrepreneur, sold a company for a couple $100 million, I think, something in the data space, and I forget exactly what it was. But he's a data and analytics guy, and he's just hardcore CrossFitter, like super fit kind of guy, and sharp. It was interesting. He was on the Whoop podcast, and Whoop and CrossFit are now partnered, or they have a licensing deal together where in the CrossFit games, you're going to be able to see the competitors' live Whoop data on screen, which is going to be awesome.
That is pretty cool. So you're
Yeah.
going to be able to see heart rate, obviously.
Yep.
What else?
Well, the three main Whoop measures strain, which is cardiovascular strain. Measures recovery. You can see how well recovered they are from event to event or day to day. Heart rate, average heart rate, and just a bunch of metrics like that. But
Do you okay? There has
love
been
that.
a huge push over the years to try to get CrossFit into like the Olympics. So, since you two are in it pretty heavy, I mean, how do you feel like CrossFit as a brand has done since last year? I mean, do you think it's recovered? I mean, do you think?
yeah.
Because I mean,
I think it's-
I've
yeah, it's
I've seen
recovered.
quite a few gyms that are doing more in-house opens than they used to.
yes, I think that you saw some gyms de-affiliate when Glassman was running his mouth. But now that Rose is back in, he's very savvy. He's culturally informed. He's kind of very much maybe a little plenty woke for my taste, but he's still like he's solid, and he's partnering with some really great. He's just making the right moves in terms of who he's partnering with and the companies that he's affiliating with and the partnerships that he's talking about forming is exciting. I think that CrossFit as a brand is just like it's barely gotten started in terms of where it's going to go. I think you're going to see. He said the number of people that his goal was to get. I think he said 100 million people CrossFitting by I forget what his time frame was for that. But
Do you know how many are now?
no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. But
There's not 100 million.
no, it's not even close to that. That's a wild goal.
You know what it is? I think it's 20 million because I heard someone say to sign up for the Open, anyone can sign up. Do you sign up, Ben? Anyone can sign up even if you don't have equipment. Like there's equipment,
right.
There's equipment free version of the Open. And it's just $20 to sign up. And we're pushing it hard at the gym because why not? Like I would have totally signed up if I knew I really need to take it easy on the back. But the last thing I needed is to get into some competitive environment and jack it up again.
Like last week's workout would have been toast for your
I
back.
couldn't done that. So someone mentioned that it's a pretty nice way to get $20 million that math doesn't.
No, that'd have to be a million.
Yeah, you're right. All right. Well, what is
but
20 million divided by 20?
A million.
A million people in the
Surely
open.
Well, maybe that's what it is then.
Could be.
There's way more than 1 million people doing CrossFit.
Yeah, there's probably 10 million or so.
But I think what is exceptional to me about CrossFit is how the brand has taken off, because it wasn't super defined.
Right.
But it was defined enough, but not over-defined. Something about what they did, maybe it was the types of workouts. I mean, it was all of the above. But it really, like, took off. Like, it's around the world.
They came into the kind of public consciousness right at a time when people were looking for something to replace some of the other communities that they were getting out of. Church, other kind of traditional communities that, it's kind of that post-Christian arc of, the West, if you will. It's like people still need community. They still need that shared sense of something. And the gym, you see the rise of the third place, basically, the coffee shop and, the gym and places where people hang out and build community. And I think that CrossFit's ascendancy was right, was timed.
So you think the timing was right?
That was part
also,
of it. Yeah.
It's going to be part of it. It'd have to be part of it. So you think the timing had to do with sort of the post-Christian...
I mean, I think that's
where we're at here.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Of course, I admit that I look at a lot of things through that lens. It's like post-Christian, and now we're post-secular. I think, because you start to see the rise of the mystical again, the rise of the spiritual, the rise of the we're post-rational, post-secular in some ways, in a lot of different ways. You see that with I don't know if we want to get into that now, but we can talk about it at some point, maybe tonight, about that whole, like, how much you see the post secular world emerging. One example is like the kind of QAnon shaman, in the middle, like the imagery of him in the Capitol rotunda, up on the desk and all that, with these horns and all this, like the imagery and the kind of very fantastical, kind of mystical nature of all of that, like that's not an accident. Like that's a cultural moment, right?
I see. Yep.
And it's a result of the secularism has been insufficient in providing meaning in people's lives. So there's this kind of increasing, I think that's why we see this increasing polarization happening.
Yeah.
Left and right are looking for meaning. And we all
that.
do, right? And obviously I would advocate for us to find meaning in the third way, which is the transcendent way, the narrow way, the way of Christ, the way of Jesus, right? But there is also, you see on the left and the right, these increasingly religious tone to the conversations. I think that's why you see cancel culture. It's like, it's not just about what's scientifically acceptable. It's become a religious war now. It's become a religious.
I could see that. So that timing of all of that happening with CrossFit coming around, I could see that timing being very good. I think there's somehow they've done a really good job on the focus being on your fitness and then also the community. But the fitness angle is, like, recently one of my buddies said he's not going to the gym anymore because of basically the kind of some of the thoughts and temptations and so forth that he's dealing with at the gym, with like being women in the gym and that type of thing. And, when he said that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, it wasn't really something that that was so much on my mind. But I think with traditional type gyms, I could see that. But at CrossFit, you're just trying to stay alive. Like, you're just trying to get it done. You know what I mean? Like, you're focused on what you've got to do. And I feel like I want to get him into CrossFit because he wants to be fit. He wants to feel good, but he doesn't want to deal with kind of unnecessary temptations at a traditional gym. And I actually don't feel like he would deal with that so much at a CrossFit gym because you've got your regimen and you've got to it takes all the concentration and willpower just to get through it. So they've done a good job at that, but also community. Like, we're really enjoying the community at our gym and like going to like Friday night lights. And 2 weeks ago we had the open announcement on a Thursday night. And then two of the coaches did the workout side by side and we got to just, hang out there. And we were waiting on one of their brothers came, but we had like 30 minutes to wait on him. So we all walked up the street to get some beers at New Heights Brewery and came back and watched him work out. Like, it was a great night, man. It was really, really fun. So they've done a good job at those two things.
I really think that what makes CrossFit magical is, I think at the heart of it is the community. It's fascinating to me. Like you've jacked up your back twice at CrossFit.
Yeah.
and you still want to come back.
Right.
Why? I mean, it can't. I mean, yes, it's fitness, I guess, in a sense, but in the scheme of things, if you were disciplined, you could get fitness anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? You could go to Planet Fitness, you could go to Anytime Fitness, you could go anywhere, and if you had a plan, you could get fit,
Yep.
right? But how many people I've seen in CrossFit literally have to have surgeries because they jacked up whatever in the middle of CrossFit because they went too hard or they did something wrong.
Yeah.
And they post about their journey back to CrossFit.
Sure.
You know, and I mean, it just speaks to like their whole like story and the posting all the time about, you know, after 4 months, I'm back at the gym and I'm back at this, I'm back at the box. And that, to me, that's such a testament to the power of community and how much we as humans need to surround ourselves with like-minded people, right? Whether that is politically, whether that, you know, the gym kind of, in a way, helps us separate the political divisions and all these other divisions that we have and bring you together.
It's true, but I'm thinking there's another draw to CrossFit, and this was actually part of the original design, was that I believe it was Greg. Was it Greg who started CrossFit?
Yep.
One of the things that he noticed was if you do these types of workouts, you're going to see muscles in places you hadn't seen muscles before. And if you're just doing bench presses and squats and your traditional type stuff at a traditional type gym, you're not going to develop a very strong or defined core or muscles on the side or wings under your shoulders. But if you do CrossFit long enough and eat right, you do start to develop muscles in places that look pretty dang cool and that you wouldn't have muscles there otherwise. And that was part of the original sort of like shtick or draw.
Interesting. There's a unique aspect to that.
There's a unique aspect to that. I mean, dude, not to cut you off, but just last thing real quick. Like you see, go to Street Horner's Instagram page. He's training in Nashville right now. I don't know how he's going to do. I don't know that much about him as an athlete. Like he's not been one of those guys that's like come in twice, you know, number 2 for the last several years, but it's like a freak of nature. These dudes are like freaks of nature.
Mm-hmm.
I actually feel like as well as Frazier has done, like you look at his body, I mean, he's a freak of nature, yes, but some of these other guys are even more defined. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the bar keeps being raised. I mean, if you look at the stuff that they were doing at the first CrossFit Games, you know, back in what was 2008, 2010, somewhere in there, and now, like the amount of weight that's being lifted for, you know, you pick the movement, power clean and jerk, you name it. The weight is so much higher now. It's crazy.
It really is. I just subscribed to Morning Chalk Up. It's a throw that to Alan. Morning Chalk Up is like a daily CrossFit thing. It's an email newsletter and a website and all of that. And so I'm following them on Instagram now, and I'm getting their daily newsletter.
They might need to sponsor you here.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to sponsor us. But they kind of pull out, and this is another cool thing about the sport, is it pulls athletes in from all around the world. And there's this 16-year-old somewhere. Do you know her name offhand? Do you know who I mean? No, okay.
My wife was just telling me about her. She's at the top of the leaderboard
She's at the top of the leaderboard. She hit 21.2 in I think she has the best time for all women at 21.2. Now, if Tia Claire Toomey went all out on 21.2, she'd probably beat the 16-year-old.
Although the 16-year-old is ahead of her on the leaderboard overall, I believe.
But that's fine because the athletes that have a shot at like getting into it's not really the regionals anymore, but certainly the games, the Open, they're not training for the Open. Mm-hmm. They need to do well enough at the Open to keep progressing. And so I think if Tia Claire Toomey was like, hey, this is like the world competition and go head to head with the 16-year-old, she'd probably beat her.
Sure.
But still, it's pretty cool to see a 16-year-old girl from somewhere in the world top of the leaderboard just randomly. It's just so people know that this is another thing that kind of was jacked up about last year was the whole Open thing. I think it was last year, right? Or was it 2019? There was so much uncertainty around. Well, there was actually a lot of uncertainty around the sport. Like the athletes weren't getting what they needed to know in time to train, and they didn't really know what was going on. So they've kind of got that figured out now. But for people that don't know, the Open is 3 workouts over 3 weeks. So it's 1 workout a week. Anyone can sign up for it. It costs $20. You can do the workout and see where you rank in the world. And the top 10% go on to the next round. And then I think the next round is the games, right?
something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that. So
One of the things I
Great
love
sport.
about CrossFit is just how, and I think going back to why it became so popular was because you can do it in less than an hour a day, and it serves you across the rest of life. It makes you sleep better. It makes just your whole life better. Like
Yeah.
you can perform better at every other part of life.
Yep.
Your sex will improve. Your, I mentioned sleep. We were just down on vacation in Florida last week, and I don't like to run. I don't run much. I probably haven't run. Before Florida, I hadn't run 10 miles cumulatively all year, probably. Like I just don't run, unless I'm running.
I hate to run.
Running from something. But we didn't drop into a gym, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to get a run in. So on 2 different days, I just up and ran 4.5 miles. 4.7 miles one day, 4.5, and I felt amazing. Mm-hmm. Pace was good, heart rate was good, felt awesome, and it was like, dang, I can up and run 5 miles and not even. I wasn't sore the next day. I felt strong, and that's CrossFit. It gets you. It builds that really strong core, and it builds your cardiovascular system, protects you against injury. I actually like people. Sometimes, like you mentioned that there's people that get injured doing CrossFit, but I think if you look at, people get injured sitting on the couch too, so.
100%.
I mean,
one of my 3 back injuries was lifting up Aria at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Trying to get her out of her bed
yeah.
and it popped my back. I mean,
There's no question there's a net gain there. And I think, and I'm not dissing CrossFit at all,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of people that will go, they get so into it and
their ego gets in the
their
way.
ego gets
Oh,
into
for
it
sure.
so much that they just completely screw themselves over.
Yeah. No.
I'm too old for that. I don't care. I don't care about that.
Are you signed up with the Open?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you like 21.1, the wall walks and double unders?
Well,
do you have double unders?
No.
I
I
don't
mean, I
either.
did it. I did it RX, but I didn't get very far.
Okay.
70 something is like, yeah. But
Okay.
it sucked. That was, not a fun workout. And last
did
week's
suck.
workout, like my back and my hamstrings are still kind of smoked from that.
I believe it. I did it with
Pretty rough.
35 pounds. I couldn't have done the 50. I think it would have probably hurt my back.
I didn't quite get done with that workout. Under the time cap.
20-minute time cap. What are you thinking about these days, Patrick? What's rolling around in your brain bucket?
MJ and I are just finishing up phase 1 of 75 Hard. So we did the first 75 days of 75 Hard, which is a mental toughness program developed by Andy Frisella. And we've been seeing tremendous gains in our mental toughness, in our, I would say, spiritual lives. It's been interesting for me to see how that discipline has bled into other parts of my life. So parts of the 75 Hard program are, you're building habits. I've built the habit of journaling every day, so I do a prayer journaling every morning. That's really been life-changing for me. And there's 2 workouts a day as part of it. So we're just wrapping up the phase 1. We've got a couple more phases to go to wrap up the 1-year Live Hard program, but that's been a big thing for us. It's been a lot of fun to see that grow us, and soft hearts and hard bodies. That's the goal. So.
Nice. I love that. So there's one thing I don't understand about 75 Hard is it seems like you're always doing it. So is this because you're part of this 1-year
It's
program?
a 1-year program. So the
Okay.
first 75 days is like a boot camp.
And you
then
did
there's-
that already.
I did that, completed that right at the new year. So
Yep. But now you're doing something else.
and then there's 3 more phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. They're each 30 days in length. And the last phase 3 ends on the 1-year anniversary.
Okay.
So there's downtime.
Are there any breaks?
Yeah.
I mean, how does,
so between you do the first 75 days, then you have the rest of the year to do the 90 days of the 3 phases.
interesting.
So we're just, March was phase 1. Then there's an enforced 30-day break between phase 1 and phase 2. You can do phase 2 whenever you want, but you have to wait at least 30 days. And the thinking there is that a lot of people, once they get off the wagon, they stay off. It's only the tough that really get back on the wagon and keep going. And I'm not too concerned about that. It's the kind of thing that once you, like for MJ and I, like when we're in that groove, like we're in that groove. Like it's not a matter of.
Do you think they play off like that Shackleton theory of like, Shackleton kind of posted, what I'm talking about, the Shackleton theory? I mean, do you think
I know Shackleton's story. I don't know the theory.
I don't know the theory.
The
Can you
theory,
describe it?
I say the theory, that's how a lot of people have talked about it, is, with Shackleton, he kind of posted the ad of like little pay, you might die,
Yeah.
but if you
Yeah.
make it, there'll be tons of glory to say
Right.
you did it,
Right.
and like, a lot of times people will make things intentionally difficult so that those who do, kind of like the Marines, and if you make it through it, you come out on the other side and say, I did that,
Yeah.
and do they play off of that in the sense of like you just mentioned, well, the ones that are serious about it will come back.
It's interesting because it's not a program that anybody makes any money off of. I mean, you don't pay for it. It's Andy just developed the program and put it out there. So anybody can do it for free. And so it's not something that, it's not like he did that to make money or
Right.
anything like that. However, I think for me, the reason I took it as something that I wanted to do is because I saw that there was parts of me that would not grow and emerge unless I faced some kind of constraints, and I needed some kind of form to bring out what I wanted to bring out in me. And it's like that kind of whatever discipline that is. For me, it was 75 hard. I was like, I knew that if I committed to this, that it would be good for me, force me to kind of. And honestly, I told MJ, I was like, I need to be somebody that I can live with. I
Right.
need to be somebody that I respect. I need to be
Right.
somebody that I like. And the part of me that is lazy and likes to sleep in and skip workouts and eat crap and all that stuff. I don't like that part of me. I don't respect that part
And
of me.
this is a good way to burn that away.
Yeah.
Because the one thing you've said before that resonated was this is a good way to sort of burn away the chaff, right? Like
Yeah.
get rid of the bull, kind of just burn away the unnecessary
Yeah.
and distill.
It's the way I think about it. And on this podcast, I've shared my story extensively. And, in my early 40s, I went through a really transformational time in my life where I woke up and found that there was 95% of me was dead wood, needed to burn away. And that's a painful thing to wake up to and an even more painful thing to go through. But I needed some kind of ongoing development program. Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about how forest fires in nature serve the role of periodically burning out the undergrowth. The dead wood that is at the bottom of the forest floor burns that out, and actually the heat is restorative in some sense and causes some plants to actually drop their seed and actually, so it generates this new life. If, on the other hand, you have environmentalists who artificially suppress forest fires, it's like for 10 years or whatever, the dead wood just keeps building and building and building. And then when a lightning strike comes or something happens in this thing, then it burns so hot that it burns the topsoil and everything, burns the trees down, the topsoil off, and nothing. It's just a wasteland. There's a metaphor there for life, right? If you just let the dead wood pile up and pile up and pile up until you're 40, 50, 60, and you don't really let it burn away, then a spark comes up, somebody gets sick, somebody dies, you get divorced, or you lose your job, or you lose your business, or whatever. It's like that kind of a thing can burn you to the ground, and you may never recover.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're the kind of person who has voluntarily submitted to a little burning on a regular basis to keep the dead wood burned off, then you are made stronger and you're renewed by challenges rather than burned
I
to
see.
the ground. So.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about Jordan Peterson for a second. But first, so the 75 hard, just so I understand it, it's 75 days. That's the initial run through.
Yeah.
And then if you want to do the year thing, it's 75 days. Then you have to take 30 days off. And then at some point before your year is up, you're going to do 3 more 30-day challenges or 2 more 30-day challenges.
There's 3 30-day periods after the first 75.
After the first 75. I got it. Okay, and you're in the first
30-day
phase, and you have 2 more to go.
Now, between
Right?
your
That's right.
second and third, they also force a 30-day in between those two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just between the first and second.
Just between the first and second. Okay.
So the second, but you could do the second and third together, but the last day of the third one has to be on the 1-year anniversary of starting the first 75 days.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to finish it.
Finish it on the
Okay,
1-year anniversary.
gotcha.
So the phase we're on now is two workouts a day. One of them has to be outdoors. Both of them have to be at least 45 minutes in length. One is you have to take a progress picture every day, read 10 pages of nonfiction in some kind of, any nonfiction book, drink a gallon of water, follow a diet. I'm doing intermittent fasting. No cheat meals or alcohol. Take a 5-minute cold shower every day.
Oh, Wow,
which
that's long.
I've taken a cold shower every day this year, and I don't know that I'll ever stop. It's one of the best
You
things
love it?
I love
Dude,
it.
I've
considered that.
I just had Josh Rankins on here. His thing's not even live yet. He's a physical therapist in Brentwood that has done a lot of work with pro athletes. He does 3-minute cold shower every day. And he started out at 30 seconds, but he goes as cold as you can get.
Yep.
Do you go as cold as you can get?
Absolutely.
You stand there for 5 minutes? Mm-hmm. Where do you have the water hitting you? Do you rotate?
A whole body. Yep.
Dude.
Yeah.
I know that.
What part of the day?
Tony Robbins talks a lot about that,
He
but
does.
he'll actually dip in. He'll actually do the dip in the ice.
Yeah,
pool.
like an ice bath,
Ice
which I've done that occasionally. Like if my back is particularly smoked or something's like inflamed, doing a 5-minute ice bath is great. In fact, the other Sunday, right after the snow melt here in Franklin, our whole family went out in the Harpeth and sat in the Harpeth for more than 5 minutes.
How was that?
It was awesome. It was cold.
What did you think? Did you think it was awesome?
Actually, Ben was in the longest, I think.
It's so good for you.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
What else are you doing as part of this phase?
And then there's, in addition to the critical, the taking a progress picture, 10 pages of reading, there's 5 of those, and then you add, for phase 1, you add 3 critical tasks that move you forward towards your goals.
Every day?
3 tasks a day that move you forward towards your goals. And you can change those up if you want. And so, for example, one of my 3 is journaling at least a page.
You're going to keep those 3 tasks for all 30 days?
You can change them up.
Oh, okay.
But I've kept the same ones all month.
Okay.
But they don't tell you what those goals are. You set them for yourself.
Those 3 additional ones for phase 1, you set yourself.
Okay.
And so my wife MJ and I we each have our own 3.
Okay.
Right.
And journaling would be like an example.
Journaling is an example. Another one of mine is that I get up feet on the ground every day before 6 a.m. So I never sleep in for this phase.
Love that. Dude, I had that nailed before time change, by the way, and then it screwed me up.
Yeah.
I've got to the point where I can't get. I'll get up at 4:30, 5:30 every morning just because my body wakes up. Now, granted, I don't know who I am past 7:30, 8 o'clock, but
Okay.
See, I'm a
every
night owl.
morning.
I love to be around at
I don't
midnight.
even. I can count on one hand since I was a kid the times I've actually spent all night up. I'd go to bed.
Well,
boom.
yeah, I've only done that once in my life. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but as a kid, you never stayed up all night.
Well, till 2 a.m., but that's different than being up for 24 hours.
I'm talking about 24. I'm talking about up all night.
I've only done that once in my life. I'll never do it again if I can help it.
You know what the hardest part is of
worst.
this phase? It's not any of the things I've mentioned so far. The hardest task of this phase on 75 Hard is the 10 minutes of dedicated visualization. You have to every day do 10 minutes of dedicated visualization, and I find that to be the most challenging.
What does that mean?
Well, you sit there doing nothing else except visualizing
what you want,
your goal or your outcome. It can vary. I mean, you can do different things different days, but you have to decide what it is you're going to visualize, and then for 10 minutes you visualize that and focus on it, and with an elevated intention and all of that.
There's a lot of power in that. I didn't tell you this, but 2 weeks ago I started getting coached by Chance Scoggins.
No way.
Yeah, way.
Come on.
3 months, man. And
Dude, I'm so jealous.
Dude, super helpful. I'll tell you this much. We've only met in person one time. Our next meeting is this coming Monday. That'll be 2 weeks. We're going to meet. We meet twice a month for 3 months, but in between, we're staying in touch with text messages. He does a lot of voice memos. And, just yesterday, I was feeling down, feeling sad. I was feeling really sad since Saturday. I actually had a really down day on Saturday, and I didn't know what was going on. And he was like, this is your brain trying to find a new pattern. Like what it's done before is it's caused you to draw back, be small, withdraw, not have goals and dreams and those types of things as a way to protect you. It's like the back part of your brain. It's like the subconscious part of it's really your mind. Whereas your logical brain, is saying one thing, but your actual subconscious is saying another. And when those two things are at odds with each other, it can cause a lot of turmoil.
Right.
I think it's something that I've dealt with for years, actually. And so he's helping me kind of like, in a sense, this sounds kind of weird, but in a sense, like rewire, help out my mind, my 100%. Subconscious. So that's a lot of value in that visualization because you're helping that part of the brain. So what I did yesterday, he was like, look, here's what you need to think about is you just need to tell your brain, look, I appreciate those thoughts, but I've got it. Like, it's okay. We don't need to pull back right now. We don't need to withdraw. We don't need to get depressed. We've got a plan. It's going to be okay. And thanks for that cautionary. Thanks for that wanting to pull back and protect me, but it's okay. We'll move forward.
One of the, I think we might have talked about this when you and I were together, but one of the biggest mental shifts came when I remember when I was in therapy. Well, I'm still in therapy constantly.
Once a month?
Yeah,
You
every
kind
once
of
a
have a
month.
schedule
to
for
this
that, right?
to this day. I still do therapy once a month. Best thing I've ever done. Top 3 things I've ever done in my life, and that's why even now I feel like I'm in an incredibly healthy place. But I still do it just because I think it's great for your mind.
So smart.
I mean, it's incredible. I'll go and just check in, and sometimes I'll start off the conversation like I don't know really what to talk about because life is going good, and by the end of it, I'm crying or something, talking about something. But for a lot of times in growing up and having trauma and the divorce and all the things, you don't realize you create habits and mindsets and all this, and to protect you. And I kind of felt bad about that. Like, and the one thing that she told me was like, that was a very useful thing in your life.
Yes,
like
exactly.
It protected you. You're, protecting yourself. All of this was, these, in a way, bad habits kind of served as a purpose for a time in your life. She's
Exactly.
like, so don't feel bad about that. She's like, but that doesn't serve you anymore. The protecting yourself and
Dude,
needing,
it's so true.
needing to like push people away helped you at one time. It just doesn't serve you anymore.
Exactly.
And it coming to that point where you're like, that's okay. That was who I was. That's not who I am now.
And that takes some deliberate rewiring and a little bit of time and some help for that back part of your brain to understand that, because logically that's not helpful anymore, but your subconscious doesn't really know that. Like you have to help like rewire it.
And you're almost like, and that was the thing, almost coming to the point where like, thank you, mind, for helping me get through this traumatic time of my life, but you don't need that anymore,
Exactly.
and making peace with that so that you can move forward. Yep. And that's been huge.
You can't rationalize yourself through that because that part of your mind doesn't work in language. It doesn't deal in language. It's not. It doesn't communicate that way. It deals with in story and images and dreams and that kind of thing. It's
exactly
like
right.
a totally different thing, and that's why this visualization is so powerful. It's like you're actually painting a picture for that part of your mind.
Yes, and that's the
see.
language that part of your mind speaks in is visualizations and pictures, and that's why that's so helpful. Last week I texted Chance because he was helping me through kind of see that, and I was just like, man, it actually made me a little bit emotional telling him that, but I was like, man, there's part of me that kind of feels sorry for my mind, because it's trying to help me, but it's not being helpful right now. But it's doing the best it can. It's trying to protect me. It's almost like felt sorry for like that part of my mind. And so I'm super encouraged to be working with Chance.
That's awesome.
You would love it, man.
I'll probably hire him sometime.
Let me say this, a plug for Chance. I've gotten therapy and counseling also, like 5 or 6 sessions twice in my life. Very helpful, very helpful. But I shouldn't have said interjected a but there, because there's really no but. Like therapy and counseling, very helpful. It tends to be more working through the past. Chance is in this kind of this, it's hard to define space, because he's really a coach. He's really like a neuroscientist. And so he's helping you move forward primarily, but he's also still doing some therapy, and that combination, it's
Pretty
really
powerful.
resonating with me.
I remember sitting
Really
down with a
helpful.
guy one time, and it was incredible. It was like a 90-minute section. I didn't go back, but it was still very informative. And he was talking about your brain really has 2 halves, or your mind and your heart. And I'm going to butcher this on, they say it so much better, but your mind thinks in a timeline. I was 6, I did this. When I was 15, I did that. When I was 20 and 30, and like there's a consistent timeline that your mind thinks through, right? But there's a part of your heart that has no timeline, right? It thinks over the course of your life. And he said that's why today you can get really emotional about something that happened when you were 10 years old, and it resonates today.
It doesn't really pick up on the fact that was 20 years ago.
It doesn't, your heart doesn't pick up on the fact that was 20 years ago, right? Because it's just as much today as it was then, right? And he was saying like there's that divider, and it's to protect you, right? And it's another thing, but he was talking about, you have to really come to grips with certain parts of your heart, and let that healing come in your heart, because it doesn't think linearly. Linearly. And how that it was an incredible thing of how your emotions are tied through your entire life, and it just how you think differently. Your mind thinks, oh, that was forever ago, but it still is real in your heart today. And until you process it, until you let it, really feel it, sit in it. That's the other thing, is learning to sit in your pain. And until you can learn how to sit in your pain, you can't sit in your joy.
What we do is we numb that pain a lot of times with either, we try to find relationships, or we go to substances, or, some kind of distraction or numbing agent to try to numb that rather than sit with it and process it. And Dr. Gabor Mate talks about how he believes that all addiction is the result of some unresolved childhood trauma. It's like at some point it became you came to believe that it was unsafe to be with yourself, and you divorced. There was a split in your psyche in some sense, and it was unsafe to fully manifest you, and so that trauma, and the fact that split happened is trauma in and of itself. So the trauma that initiated it, and then the fact that your psyche split and you became these kind of two parts, and it's like at some point there's work to be done to reintegrate that and to process whatever trauma happened that, because that, to your point, that's still a current day experience for your mind.
I was someone, Tim Graw at our CrossFit gym gave me a book yesterday, Hell Yeah or No by Derek Sivers. He wrote it in 2020. That's the copyright date on it. And I didn't know this book existed. I would not have bought it and read it. He gave it to me, and it's Derek Sivers, who I've heard of before and enjoyed. And you would like this book, Patrick. You both would like this book. It's really great. One of the things he says in there is like, picture yourself eating until you're full. Like, we've all experienced that, right? I mean, you eat until you're full. We've all experienced that. Well, think about how that would feel in other areas of your life. If you were to, say, enjoy a moment where you just felt full, you felt satisfied, you felt present, and like just complete and satisfied and full at this point in your life. And to your point about challenge and hardship and fire burning away the dead wood, I've experienced that 2 or 3 very specific times in the last year. Prior to that, I don't know that I've experienced it much at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That's I don't even know how to properly communicate that feeling. But when you're just sitting there and it's like, life is good.
Do you want to talk about specifically? Can you paint a picture of that?
How that feels in that moment?
No, what brought that about for you, or what?
Oh, I mean, for me, it was for sure the challenge of working through Woodtex and Riverwood cabins and those difficulties and trying to turn that around and trying to make business decisions in the midst of just sirens and noise and stress and decisions and changes and I mean, you were there, so you know what this feels like. But it's like trying to patch. I mean, it felt like you're trying to patch the Titanic after it's hit the iceberg. It's like, this is difficult. Let's go. But
and there was a sense
very difficult.
Do you think that's something like what they refer to as flow state?
Like when you're feeling satisfied,
or like when you're in that space of where you're just in that Zen mode of you're firing on all cylinders and you're inner calm despite the outer external stressors.
So I think of them as maybe a little bit different, because I think a flow state where you're doing something, it might be something you're doing at work, or it might be something you're just doing, a hike or whatever it may be, but where you're just enjoying what you're doing and time passes, and next thing you know, a few hours have gone by and you're just in that flow state. That's what I think of flow state. Mm-hmm. What I'm talking about is very specific, only an hour or two where you're sitting by a campfire or whatever it would be for people. And it's like you just feel a fullness of life and an okayness and a satisfaction at a really deep soul level. That's...
when those times are for me, there's been a couple over the past year, and I think it's always been when I'm surrounded by my family, my wife and kids.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's like we're sitting around the table having a conversation, or sitting around the fire, or we're exploring, adventuring somewhere, hiking, doing something, that's surrounded by family. And, when the kids have their friends over at the house, and it's just this sense of, I experienced that, what you're talking about.
That's exactly it. So
I remember the latest one I had was this last trip to the beach. And we, it was one of those nondescript, kind of like you're just sitting around the family, with the family. I remember we were there just sitting down. I think I had my cigar and the kids were playing in the sand. And and Jax which is my second son. He was just going, and Finn was over here. My oldest was just playing in building a sandcastle, and Jax was going back and forth, getting water in this little tub and spilling it as he was walking back, trying to build his little sandcastle. And it was just that moment of like, this is what life's all about, because I have a hard time at times, even today, balancing like ambition and contentment, right? They kind of feel like they clash so many times, and like having that moment, like, man, I just want to stay in this moment forever.
I want to respect our audience here and not be too direct, but I think there's something here for young men, particularly, who might be listening. There's a lot of voices out there directing them to pursue their own desires, to the maximal, to the end, basically. It's like maximal individual freedom is kind of the story that the Western male is kind of, that's the story he's told is the ideal to strive for. And here we are, you in your 30s, I'm in my 40s.
30s, yeah.
30s, and we're all talking about some of the best times in our life are when we're pouring ourselves out for the people around us. We're adopting responsibility. We're in the trenches of doing the thing, trying to turn the ship, or playing with the kids, or, sitting with the kids around a campfire or whatever, it's like, those are the things that bring about that sense of meaning. And there is a crisis of meaning in the world today, and for the reasons we talked about prior. And there's also an antidote to that.
Yes.
And I think it's maybe just worth pointing that out, specifically.
I'm glad you pointed that out. And we have a lot of young men listening to this podcast, so we can talk to them all we want. And that's going to be time well spent. I think for me, what I have experienced in the last 2 years is by being kind of second generation, running the family business, second generation. I didn't start with Tex, Dad did. And also because he died when I was 10. And then I kind of took it over in 1920-ish. There was that extra sort of connection, like emotional connection, that's not always healthy in business. And it can tie you to it in ways that are not helpful.
Maybe cloud your judgment.
It can cloud judgment, for sure. So there's that aspect to it. But also getting a young start in, look, this is a very small business, but it had some awareness in the local community because of Dad dying and Mom taking it over and everything like that. And, it's, I can see now in hindsight that I was being someone that I really wasn't meant to be for a season. And it was wearing at me. And I think that was part of the change of bringing in other leadership, and which was a fine thing to do. But what I'm really excited about now is like, and by the way, just so I think that's some of the pain that I experienced when that ended. It's not just, I was running a business that went belly up, basically. It's more than that. It's like it was tied to my identity, and there was a family connection there, and all of this. And furthermore, when you're running a successful business in a small community, then you start to feel expectations, and then you start to feed those expectations, even if it's not who you are. That's a very dangerous path to go down, super dangerous. So what I'm like really excited about is now I feel like we are, with what we're building now, I just have this peace. Like I feel like it's congruent with who I am as a person.
I love that.
And that feels really
great.
good. And so that's what I would say to young men listening. I guess anyone, but certainly young men listening, is look, just get into position, do things in a way. And sometimes it's more about the way you do things than what you're doing. But do the things that are congruent with who you are as a person, and certainly do them in a way that's congruent with who you are as a person, because when that starts to separate, that can cause a lot of stress and frustration and turmoil, and I just don't see that ending well.
Right.
I mean, that might end, I think it happens a lot. Sometimes it ends in a divorce. Sometimes it ends in your kids hating you. Sometimes it ends in a business failing. Sometimes it ends in, I mean, who knows? You can go down the list. Addictions, all of these things.
Yeah. I mean,
You-
all the
you
way
have to stay
to
congruent, you know,
Yeah.
to who you are as a person. And I'm not saying you're selfish, like you make everyone bend to how you want it. That's not it. But you have to do things and do them in a way that's congruent with who you are as a person. And sometimes that means a major change. And for me, it was hard to kind of imagine being in a position that we're in now, where that's all been let go, and now we can build better going
really
forward.
freeing.
It is
Right.
freeing.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually an integrity piece to it. It's like where the inside and the outside line up. It's like everything is true. It's like,
Yes.
I'm not trying to be something I'm not. It's
Yes.
like I'm aligned.
And that's
you know?
priceless. It really is priceless.
It really is.
And it bleeds into all areas of life then. Your marriage, your kids, all of that. Like, that's all going to get better when what you're doing and who you are is congruent. I mean, that's and how you're doing it. Like, that's all, man, it's hard to put a price tag on that.
I went through a difficult season last year where, a couple of years after my kind of awakening and spiritual renewal and all that, where I still came to discover that there was large pieces of me that I hadn't really fully reckoned with, and I was not well aligned. There was part, and the way I discovered that was like I would say something and then there was another part of me that would object to that in some sense. It's like,
Right.
you don't actually really believe that, or that's not entirely your thought, or that's, it's like, and I started to just be uncomfortable with that. And I think it was part of spiritual growth, is kind of the Spirit kind of bringing about this kind of conviction about that. And I went through this process where I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything that I don't believe. And I went through 3 months where I couldn't speak. I couldn't write on my blog. I could barely post on social media. I could keep functioning in work and all that, but it's like I ended up changing jobs. I ended up, and made some moves to realign. But it's like, in order for me to actually heal from that, I had to stop talking because I was saying a bunch of shit that I didn't really.
Yeah.
I couldn't. There was part of me that objected to it.
Yes.
It's like that causes, again, that kind of misalignment, that divorce in your
Yes.
soul in some sense, and that's not good.
No.
Right.
But you have to be awake to notice that.
That's right. Now, do you think, let me ask you this. Do you think it was because you were saying things that you inwardly didn't know to be true? Or was it that you were saying things that you inwardly knew weren't the most important things to be saying?
It was maybe that, but it was also, I think that, but I almost think of it as I was being, my mode of being wasn't like I was saying I wanted these things in life, but I was being this way.
Yeah.
I was acting, I was, back to the idea of what are the behaviors and patterns and subconscious processes that dictate our outcomes in life. It's like those were pointed one way, and what I said I wanted to be was pointed another way.
Yes,
Right.
that makes sense. Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
Of maybe this, well, I shouldn't say this is an example because maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But the one area for me that resonates, that I've came to grips with just in the last probably 18 months, is I'm not money motivated.
Right.
And I thought to be a good entrepreneur, you had to be. And so for years, I thought I had to be money motivated, and it would be lesser if you're not, and it's not acceptable if you're not.
Right.
And you should be chased for all these reasons, including benefit other people, giving to missions, all of these things. You should be money motivated. I'm okay with people being money motivated, actually. Well, to an extent. The Bible does have some things to say about that. But when a lot of that chafe kind of burns away, and I'm real like, come on, man, really? Are you or aren't you? No, I'm really not.
Yeah.
Now,
That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about.
yeah.
I think for me, it came. I don't think I've ever really been money motivated. However, I was mostly motivated by this sense of I'm gonna be better, right? Like that was my whole thing. Was, we've talked about this several times, but like there was this period of my life which me and my dad had a very fractured relationship, and almost everything that I did filtered through the lens of, am I going to be better than him? right? Like
Then
I'm going to
him
be
specifically,
him, and I think
or
there
would
was
you'd cast that to other people too?
I would cast that to other
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
and specifically men in my life, right? Not just him, but uncles and different people and pastors and everyone. Like feeling let down by those people and be like, I'm going to be better than you. I'm going to be a better dad than you. I'm going to be.
Yes. Does that
All
come
of
from?
it,
Does hey,
you know?
Alan? Do you think that comes from dad issues? Because
100% it
Do you think
does.
it does? Because I struggle with that a lot. I still struggle with that.
I to this day, I think that like for me, I know that I'm most at peace when I'm sitting on the beach or I'm sitting around a fire and all this stuff. But like, there's still that inner struggle in me at times when I'm like, I want to build something not because I give a shit about the money,
Yeah.
but because I want to be better.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah,
and
no,
I you know what I
deal
mean?
with
Like,
that.
I want to be able to stand up on this hill and say, I was better than you, right?
Wow.
You
Yeah.
know, like
Wow.
I made it.
No, I totally resonate with that, man.
You know, like without your help, you wasn't there for me. I made it.
Wow.
You know,
Yes.
and like really learning to let go of that over the last 2 years. Like even now, it makes me emotional talking about it.
I see that.
You know, like just like having to be okay with myself. You know, being okay with myself, and I don't have to prove anything to anybody. I don't have to prove anything to him, this person, or that person. Like
Wow.
I'm okay with myself, and that's been a journey that I think I've made a ton of progress on. But I still fight against. I still bump
What
against.
makes you emotional talking about that?
I think it's probably still a little bit of pain that I've not. I mean, I've worked through a lot of it, but like I think growing up, I think I always had this feeling of like, why weren't you there for me? Like, you know, like even like a pastor that I had for a long time, I remember like constantly going to him like, hey, can we have coffee? Can we talk? I'm struggling, and it was always like, yeah. When things slow down, you know, while perpetually like being put in leadership positions because I had a sense of leadership and I could lead people and all this stuff. It's like, you know, you just go, you know, like I had to figure it out.
You almost feel used a little bit.
I felt used, you know, and I remember even to this day, it's like this, I always had this vivid vision of like me standing in front of this forest, right? And like literally trees as far as you could see on both sides. And I remember talking to my therapist about this, like this, imagine a forest that the trees are as tall as you can see and as far left and as far right. And just standing there with a machete and like, I'm in there. Like, I got to find myself, you know, like I'm going to carve my own way. You wasn't there for me. I'm going to make it, you know? And like that kind of thing is kind of been a constant struggle for me, you know, the finding of myself and just being okay with that, being okay with who I am as a man, being okay with who I am as a father, you know, and always striving to be better, just not having to prove something to people.
I believe it's the quintessential hero's journey. You know, it's like every story, or not every, but baked deep into all of the stories that shape our culture and shape us as people is this narrative of the hero who goes out and slays the dragon and rescues the virgin or gets the gold and brings it back to his community and shares that. And in all of those stories, you know, Pinocchio going to the depths and you know, going through a death and rebirth and in some sense rescuing his father, his dead father. In all of those stories, there's an element of the father figure who has become too rigid and too blind, sometimes willfully so. And in culture, it's like the structures that keep culture together and make things work. Sometimes they get too rigid and too blind, and they need to be renewed by the hero going and learning something new, going through a transformational process and slaying the dragon and getting the gold, the treasure, and bringing it back. And in doing so, becoming the archetypal father, becoming everything that they can be. And in doing that, they become everything that their blind, dead father no longer is or could have been and wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so you're on the hero's journey. You're on that, and that's all of us have to go through that journey at some level, no matter what our earthly father's journey is like. There's an element of that in all of us. Of we need to become the hero. We have to act out that hero's journey in our lives, and you know, it's like we have to very carefully see there's two primary elements that the hero needs. And this is you see this in Egyptian creation stories. You see it in the creation story. You see it in scriptural narratives. You see it in the stories that Disney tells us. Like it's baked so deep into us, it's impossible to even get to the bottom of it. But it's like we need to see clearly and we need to speak truthfully. And through careful sight and truthful speech, we can set things right. We can rescue our father. We can become the archetypal father that sets things right for our family, our communities, and in doing so, we set the world right again. And actually, that's what we need to do. I think that's maybe something that we fundamentally miss right now in the West is we think that the state, in this kind of post-Christian, now even post-secular world that we're in, it's like the most natural kind of stand-in for God is the state because it's all powerful, it's all seeing, it feeds everybody and provides for everybody and protects everybody. It's like that's God, right?
Wow.
And so, that's obviously the object of our worship. And that's why you see this increased, polarization. People the power struggle is real for real reasons, right?
Yes.
But the way we set that right is not through top-down change. We don't, run up Capitol Hill and storm the gates and try to take over, but we do it through we do it through careful speech, truthful speech, and careful vision, and setting things right in our own lives, and then setting things right for our families, our communities, and then we set the world right.
Yeah, and this is where I have some amount of optimism for the future, is because Ben Miller sitting here at 16 years old, listening to this is going to be, this may or may not have an impact on him at all, but it may have a tiny little impact. And I wasn't sitting at this table at 16 years old.
Yeah.
But Ben is.
Right.
So the next generation, can we help them along by being actual, strong men? Like not the weird stuff, but just being genuine and talking through this stuff openly, sharing our fears and insecurities, because that's one thing you said, Alan. I feel like we sort of have similar journeys, like different inputs, but sort of similar challenges along the way, because that whole thing of like, I'm super competitive and I don't like to play games that I don't have a good shot at winning. And some of that I'm okay with.
Yeah.
Like board games, chess. I don't know how to play chess. I don't want to learn. Can you beat me at checkers? Anyone in this room could beat me at checkers. I don't really care. It's not okay, but there's a few things that I don't want to lose at.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And so being okay with starting to like let some of that other stuff go, because when you are competitive like that, I think it's hard to face into weaknesses and insecurities.
Yeah.
And even working with Chance, this is one thing I'm noticing is like, Kent, you have actual insecurities. Sit with that.
Yeah.
Because you do. And
Because
you pushed that down for a long time. You didn't think you had insecurities. You thought, other people do, but you don't in these areas. No, I did.
Yeah.
And I do. And now I'm seeing that and accepting that for kind of the first time. So and fears too. Mm-hmm. Like you said something recently that's super helpful. It was at our dad's group last time of thinking and talking in terms of fears and desires. Very helpful. I'm using that. And so if I I had a talk with Mariana about like, here's my fears in this area, here's my desires. And it was like couching it in those terms is very helpful. So just back to your point though, about being competitive, I think the people that are competitive have a harder time facing into their insecurities and their fears.
Yeah.
And if they don't have it, I don't believe them. They have insecurities and they have fears. Now is as good a time as any to face into those, figure out what they are, sit with them a little bit, and then be more whole going forward.
And here's the fascinating thing to me, and this is something that I feel like I've been learning. I haven't learned 100%, but take like this, again, going back to this internal sense of ambition that I have, competitiveness. Like Lauren gets on to me because we're playing some stupid Mario game with Finley, and I'm like, just jump on the stupid thing, like she's like, you're not making it fun. Stop.
Yeah.
Like it's literally a game, a Switch game for like a 6-year-old, right? And I'm like, just come on, just do it, But it's less about the competitive or the ambitious part of me that is inherently wrong, and because it's not. It's the motivation behind it. Like why? Okay,
Right.
you know, you have the ability to build a great business. Okay, that's great. There's nothing wrong. You shouldn't push that away. The question comes to what is driving that decision, right?
That's right.
Is it am I wanting to build a company? Am I wanting to do this because that's inherently who I am, or am I doing it because I'm trying to prove something? You know, and at the end of the day, you may still do that. You may still build that business or make that money or have that job. But if it can come from a good place, of a place of this is an expression of myself and not because I need to prove something to someone, then you have the same outcome, you know, ultimately.
Yeah.
But you have it from the root is different.
Yep.
You know, so the happiness and the contentment is comes from a better place than the motivations originally there.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing that's coming at us more is like sex stuff. And porn is not, I mean, dude, I have literally dealt with every sin under the sun. Okay. Thank God. I just think God knew that I was going to have enough of trouble. Like porn was not one of the things that I've dealt with. A lot of guys deal with porn. And it's no longer like you got to go out to get it. Like it's coming to you. Literally 3 days ago, Kobe, was it? I got a picture on my phone of like cleavage, like boobs. Now they were like under a shirt and stuff. I don't know who sent it. Like it was it was like a number that's
Spam.
I think it was a Russian
Spam
bot
number.
is what I think it was. But literally to my phone. So like, Ben, you might get that at some point. Like you might actually you don't have to go to a certain website anymore. You don't even, I mean, it's been on Twitter for a long time, but it's now at the point where it's going to just come in the form of maybe even text messages straight to your phone. So like I feel like you've got to have some amount of inner strength, and you have to have experience, like you need to experience the joys of living wholly and congruently and with a purpose to just delete that stuff. And if you haven't experienced those things, then, that's going to all of a sudden be like a greater reward than living with purpose congruently, like towards something. Right. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, porn hijacks all of the like natural pleasure systems and the motivation systems in your brain and all this. Like it's very, very effective at hijacking those.
It is. And I think that that like people even like outside of, I mean, we all believe in a creator God and his son, Jesus Christ here, but even people that don't believe in that, I'm seeing more and more like, dude, I'm not watching any porn anymore. That's not helpful. I'm seeing more of that, which is
interesting
promising
to me because I've been noticing that there's kind of a split happening in culture where there's more and more people who are speaking out against porn. I think it might be part of the kind of element of the Me Too awareness of like, you know, we want to care for women. We want to be more conscious about how we're talking about women, not objectifying them and all that. But then I also see people that are prominent, have some following on social media, let's say, when they speak out against it, there's a pretty loud element of the mainstream that let's say, well, the pro-sexual revolution left, at least, is very triggered by the anti-porn movement. The anti-porn movement gaining steam, and like on Reddit, there's a big community of No Nut November, where it's an anti-masturbation thing that they every November they say like we're just voluntarily not going to masturbate. That's the you know and like
we're just not going to jack ourselves off for 30 days.
For 30 days, right? And so it's like
75 hard, baby.
That's part of that 30-day second phase 2.
That could be a thing to look into. But there's a tremendous amount of opposition. Like on, you know, if you look at Twitter and you look at what people are talking about,
really,
like there's opposite the pro-sexual revolution left, if you will, or the progressive movement. That one of the values of the progressive movement is ultimate individual liberty to, you know, take on the identity and behaviors that you want at any time, right? And so they're very threatened by that, and I'm starting to see. I've been in some conversations on, because of course my life was nearly wrecked by porn, so I'm very tuned into, into what's going on in that world and how culture is responding to it, and where the current, where we're at in this moment on it. And it is fascinating to me to see that happen. There's a rising awareness of the damage.
Yeah.
And there's a rising kind of gasping for survival, or
Wow.
there's a large and growing element of like, we've got to protect the progressive mores of the sexual revolution.
One of the main ones being individualism, and whatever you want to do in the moment is fine. Go ahead and do it.
Ultimate
is that
sexual
what it's
freedom.
threatening?
Yeah.
Ultimate sexual. Huh.
Sexual freedom, expression, identity, all that.
Wow.
Ben and I were just listening to a podcast on the way up, and Angela Schreier is a journalist who wrote a book about the explosion in transgenderism among teenage girls. There's been somewhat of a rise in transgenderism, but among the population of teenage girls, it's blown up by more than 2,000% in a very short amount of time, and it does seem to be something to do with social media. Like there's girls that she talked to a bunch of experts and interviewed a bunch of experts and read a bunch of studies and all that, and what's happened is there's the humanities, the psychologists and all that, the communities that kind of set the standards of care for those practices have been largely taken over by the progressive movement. And so now, when a 16-year-old girl goes and says, "Hey, I think I'm actually a boy. I'm trapped in a girl's body, and I want to have sexual reassignment surgery," if you're a licensed clinician, you're not allowed to question that. You have to approach that with an affirmative stance. That's actually part of the...
If you're a professional licensed counselor, PLC, you have to affirm their statements.
Yeah.
I've heard this too. It's crazy.
And so, kids are going off to university, and much to their parents' surprise and chagrin, are getting double mastectomies and starting testosterone courses. In the UK, it's worse than it is here. In some UK schools, 15 to 20% of the classes, 15 to 20% of the women, or the young girls, are identifying as transgender all of a sudden.
In the UK?
Yeah, and in some, but it does seem to be something that seems to be it seems to fuel itself, kind of like anorexia does. Like when there's a bunch of young girls, when there's a couple anorexics in a community of girls, they found it helpful to separate that, because that can really spread. That kind of ideation can really spread among young women. And it seems like transgenderism has some of the same thing. And so what is really sad about this is then if you look on YouTube now, there's every week you could go back and see more people who have who are trying to detransition, and they're getting into their 20s and 30s and realizing they're maybe actually gay, or they're something else, but they're not, and they're really regretting, the sexual reassignment surgeries and the infertility that comes with the, hormone therapies. And it's like, there's few people who are as miserable as a 39-year-old woman who wants children and can't have them anymore. And it's like, that's devastatingly sad. And the thing is, at 16, what do you really know at 16?
Well, that's what I see with that is this disconnect between now, disconnect between an agenda and truth. Like what's happening with the LPCs, if they can't actually help someone work through those issues, and legally they have to just simply affirm that person, age 12, age 13, age 15, whatever that young girl, young boy is, they need truth. But that truth is no longer allowed for for reasons, whatever those may be, political agenda or whatever it is. You can't now bring all of truth to bear on that circumstance. You have to just simply affirm it. And that's super dangerous. And that's what happens with porn too. I remember as a kid being at one of my cousins' place, and there was three of us cousins for whatever reason. One of the things we had a lot of fun with back in the day, like mid-teens, was like sneaking around at night, like breaking into the grandparents' house to steal snacks, or sneaking off to one of their friends who was on a date. Like we had a lot of fun with that. No problem with that. If kids want to do that, it can be a lot of fun, Ben.
Take note.
But I remember sneaking. Like we walked like probably at 11:30 or midnight, walking. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say like 2 miles. Like it was not super close, to spy on one of our cousin's friends who was on a date. Well, guess what we saw? We saw him under this guy under a blanket with his girlfriend. Who knows what they were doing, but they were totally under a blanket on the couch, right, laying down. There was a movie playing, but no one was watching the movie. Well, when you see that as a young man, there's a certain amount of like there's a certain amount of like desire for that, you know, like that's kind of built in, but you just kind of know he had to act a certain way and talk a certain way and be nice. Like you had to sell that person on A, talking to you to begin with, B, going on a date, and C, getting under a blanket with you. You know what I mean? Like that, there's a certain amount of like actions you have to take in selling to make that happen. There's a certain amount of truth. Like, should have we done that? Maybe not. You know, I don't suggest you go around spying on people, you know, that are having sex or not, or trying to see intimate moments. But if you do that, there's a certain amount of understanding you have around that encounter. None of that with porn. Mm-hmm. None of that. Like it's just straight up. Whatever's going on.
There's no cost to know that you don't. Yeah, you're getting all of the kind of physiological kind of upside without any of the risk or without exposing yourself to any of the risk.
So I can see where it's super dangerous. Then you kind of develop these mind patterns, and that's actual scientific thing where you develop this pattern in your brain that needs that and wants that, and so you just have to like satisfy it, and you kind of need a cleansing. It's one of the things where psychedelics like mushrooms can be helpful. Apparently, there's a lot of studies about that going on right now, where it can help you kind of clean that slate.
Going back to this idea that we're, trying to what you talked about, we're not aligned with. Like that's not aligned with reality. It's not the truth, and I see that more I've seen that emerge in a couple different areas. Well, the transgenderism is one. It's like, well, we're not actually helping these young people be aligned with how reality is actually set up, right? And so if you trying to tear holes in the fabric of reality, like how's that going to end up? That's
exactly.
That's not a good. There's not a good outcome there.
No, there's not.
And another example of that, and this is totally unrelated, but it's something that's been kind of bugging me, is it's about the situation with the Georgia spa shooter recently.
I don't know anything about that.
A guy that shot up those Asian spas a couple weeks ago.
I don't watch a lot of news.
He still doesn't know anything about it. Tell us what happened.
I haven't watched the news in 2 years.
So a Baptist kid who is apparently addicted to porn, porn-addled brain, and also locked up in the whole purity culture, shame, self-hatred, all that. And ended up with a sex addiction and or something like that, and was frequenting these Asian spas that were fronts for prostitution, and he would go in and so he couldn't resist going in.
Oh, they were fronts for prostitution?
Yeah, that's what most of those places are.
Okay,
got it.
So
to resist
some
the
of those
temptation,
roadside Asian spas are.
Okay.
Fronts for prostitution, mostly.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying there's not some element to it that has legitimate spa services, but most of it is a front for prostitution. And frankly, they're filled with trafficked women.
Oh, man, it's awful.
But anyway, he, in an act of hatred, self-hatred, and hatred for, the world and everything, he goes into a couple of these spas and starts shooting the place up. And he had told his roommate that, he had talked about how they're such a temptation. He wants to get rid of them and all that. But his own testimony about what he did and why he did it is that he was trying to eliminate this temptation for sexual gratification. The director of the FBI, said that this doesn't appear to be racially motivated. It appears to be, this other motivation. But that doesn't stop the narrative from oh, this is an act of Asian hate. And now let me just pause here and say I have an Asian sister-in-law, and she has been frequently the subject of discrimination and has suffered abuse at the hands of people who were, racist and hateful towards her. So I know that exists. but and you might object and say, well, what does it hurt to use this as a way to raise awareness about Asian discrimination and hate? But I still see this same thing at play, which is, okay, on one hand, he said, here's why I did it. The FBI director said, here's why he did it. The guy's roommate said, here's why he did it. The guy's parents say, here's why he did it. But everybody else in the mainstream media says, this is a hate crime. This is a crime that was driven by hate against Asians. I'm convinced if those spas were full of Mexicans or Armenians or African Americans or whatever, he'd have done the same thing.
Straight up.
Had nothing to do.
Caucasian Americans.
Yep. Had nothing to do with that. And, so after the FBI director got up at the press conference and talked about, oh, this doesn't appear to be a racially motivated crime, one of the senators from Georgia was like, oh, we know hate when we see it. And again, it's like that. And that's another example of we've moved past the age of science and rationale. We're now in the age of post-Christian religion, right? There's a religious element at play here where it's like, and it's part of critical theory as far as I can tell. It's like, well, it feels like it is, and so it must be. And me feeling like it is,
that's what matters.
Is what matters. And you might say, well, what's the harm in that? And I'm like, well, what is the harm in pawing large holes in the fabric of reality? Like, what is the harm in that? It's like, well, where does that end up? Where does that take us? It's like, there's plenty of, like, the problem of racially motivated hatred is a very difficult and complex problem to solve. And the only way that I can tell we're going to solve it is through very careful speech and communication and setting the world right, not going further towards tearing these massive holes in the fabric of reality all around us. It's like, no, that's precisely the wrong thing. And frankly, I think it's driven by this need to create protected classes of people that I can then protect and set up against each other. And that's actually a core fundamental element of Marxism. If you look back at, why did Marxism end up in the 20th century killing 150 million people or 130 million people? It's like, it was always through identifying a victim class and then eventually setting them up against each other, and then you could just, you could kill 6 million people here and 10 million people over here. And it's like, and I just see a thread between these things where it's like, when you go out of your way to try to create victim classes, that does not end well. That ends in tears every time it's tried.
Wow.
And to use this guy's, like, we need to have a conversation about why are we, I just came up Route 75 from Florida. There's so many, they call them rub and tugs, right? And go get a massage.
Get your dick tugged.
Yep. Flip it over. Boom. Like there's one every couple miles, right? It's like they're open 24 hours a day. It's like these Asian spas along the road. And it's like,
really? There's some every several
you
miles?
come up I-75.
How can you tell?
There are billboards along the interstate. It's just everywhere, right?
And you just kind of know that's what's going on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's like we need to have a conversation about why that's happening. Why are trafficked Asian women in those spas, and why are we allowing that in our communities? Why are we allowing that in our communities in ostensibly conservative states like Georgia, who would say that they're, right-wing states, right? It's like, okay, whatever, but that's a difficult conversation. We need to have a conversation about purity culture and how it generates the kind of people like this guy that ended up, and frankly, people like me, whose life was nearly destroyed by, compulsion along these lines. And so those are difficult conversations, and we can only solve those problems through very careful, truthful speech.
But those are not
we're
the
making a
conversations.
whole conversation over here about Asian hate, and it has nothing to do with anything.
Dang, man.
Do you
And
think
Dude,
it
that's
doesn't solve
crazy.
Asian hate in the first place, and which is actually also a problem that needs to be solved.
Here's the
my
thing that I
gosh.
have a hard time with. When we're talking about the conversations like this, I feel like one of the I don't know if we talked about this, but I feel like one of the challenges that we have in today's culture is the need to take a side. Like this is my side of the road and this is your side of the road. And whatever my side says, I'm forced to agree with, and whatever's on this side, you have to force to agree. Like,
Polarized.
I consider myself a conservative, you know, overall. Like, I have more debates with my conservative family than I do my liberal friends, and mostly probably because I have more conservative people around me. But like, you can be objective and realize, not everything that quote unquote my side is saying is true, right? Like, take the Asian hate. You know, we have this conversation a lot in like team meetings we have, because Nate, who is my best friend, and he is also the guy that runs all my ops, he's Filipino 100%. And then Kathy, which is also a girl on my team, she's a woman, right? So, and we had these conversations of, look, we had just feel like this need of, okay, I'm on this side, you're on this side. Anything you say is wrong. Everything that I say is right. And I think that it has caused further divide within rational conversation, right? Like, and this is what I was having with somebody that was very close to me. And they take like, you're talking about trafficked and, you know, Hollywood and having a lot of, you know, trafficking in Hollywood. And I'm like, that is a real problem. It is, I believe that it is a real problem in society. But whenever you throw things out there just because my side said it and you don't have a rational thought behind it, I'm like, here's what happens. Whenever something true does actually happen, take Asian hate. Does Asian racism happen?
Absolutely.
100%. Does racism against African Americans happen? 100%. But when you politicize something, you know, what that happens is when real racism happens, you can't address it at that
clouded.
point. It's clouded. I remember, you know, whether it was Obama, whether it was Trump, whether it was Bush, whether it was Clinton, you know, all of these things, you know, I just see it. I see it as a problem because you was either pro-Trump or against Trump. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Either everything that he did was wrong or everything that he did was right. Mm-hmm. You know? Same thing with Obama. I remember having conversations with people. I'm like, they would make stuff up against Obama that was completely obviously not true. But I'm like, if you don't want to vote for Obama, you can find a million reasons not to like him.
But Antichrist is probably not the best reason.
Right. You know, like,
I remember
if you don't like somebody, there's a million reasons. Don't make something up.
Yeah.
Because if you make something up, you look like an idiot.
Well,
right?
you lose credibility.
You lose credibility. And I think that's why the racial divide continues to happen, because we can't stop and say, okay, going back to this truth aspect, what is true in this situation? What is not true in this situation? Where is probably this side a little wrong, this side a little right?
Yeah, and your whole point of, like, you know, making something up presupposes that there's an objective reality, right? And that idea is under attack. The idea that there is an objective reality is not, you know, universally agreed
And when
on.
that goes down, golly, it's a free-for-all.
Yeah.
One of the things that David French had in his weekly email that I get is he's a local political commentator, and he was calling out some of the damages that have been done from purity culture and showing how the shoot up in Georgia is basically purity culture at its extreme.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he said, which I'd never thought of before, and I totally agree with, is that purity culture at its extreme, it's not necessarily like really good Christians being really good Christians. No, it's a different category altogether. And what it basically is at its core is prosperity gospel in a different form. And I feel like we've sort of become like aware of, or maybe even sometimes have liked to discuss how prosperity gospel is so wrong in terms of, well, if you just believe Jesus, you'll get money, you get the house, you get the boat, you get the everything, right? Well, that's kind of common now. That's been around for some time. We're kind of mostly aware of that and how that's not true and so forth. I mean, Christ had a lot of suffering in his life. Christ's followers have a lot of suffering. This is not all like roses and petals and prosperity when you start following Christ. Well, the prosperity culture, or purity culture is another form of prosperity gospel, which taught that if you can definitely not have sex before you get married, and definitely not look at porn, definitely not have impure thoughts, definitely not do any of the stuff that's impure, then in exchange, you will get a really great marriage. You will have really great sex. You will have a wonderful family. Everything's going to be great. You're going to have a good life. And dude, that's not true. Like some people, this is one of the things he said, where some people have like saved themselves for marriage and then never gotten married. It's like, well, no, I did everything right. I didn't have sex before marriage, but I didn't have sex when I was 18, when I was unmarried. I didn't look at bad stuff. I like protected myself. Why am I not now married and getting to enjoy the benefits of all of that? Or you might have someone that saved themselves for marriage, they get married, and it turns out they have a condition where sex is painful. Well, this is just prosperity gospel in another form.
Yeah.
So, I mean, apparently, I'd never heard of this before, but apparently, like, maybe this still happens, or maybe it was, like, more back in the day. I don't know, because, dude, the 90s had a lot of things jacked up. I'll say that. And one of the things I think was a little weird is, like, apparently there's, like, people would take this to the, I don't know, I guess I would call it kind of extreme, where, like, of course, we're all kind of familiar with, like, purity rings, and, I mean, that's probably fine, but, like, where you go to the extreme and, like, dads are taking their daughters to a particular dance where you're dancing with your daughter and everyone else there is dancing with their daughter, celebrating their purity and how one day they're going to get married. It's like, dude, this is really kind of weird. And if you think about it, this is what Mariana was saying the other night, is you have sort of like this I guess oppression is really what it is, where it's like, if you're a girl, if you're female, then what you need to do until you get married is you need to protect the boys from having bad thoughts with how you act, how you talk, definitely how you dress. That's all on you, girl.
Yep.
Don't cause temptations, okay? Now you get married. Now what's the game? Serve your husband. Please him. Keep him happy. Never say no. As much sex as he wants, whatever kind he wants, just say no. Go along with it. Keep him happy, because if you don't keep him happy, then he might go out and do bad things. Dude, this is so messed up. I mean, this is oppression is what it is, because the first half of their life, or the first third of their life, they're responsible for men's behavior and having impure thoughts about them. And then the last 2/3 of their life, they're responsible to keep their men happy. And if they don't, he's going to go out and do bad things. Dude, Patrick, you're responsible for your own decisions. I am too. Ladies can wear yoga pants around me, and if I have impure thoughts, you know who that's on? It's on frickin' me.
That's right.
You know what I mean? It's on me.
Yeah.
And so if I'm googly-eyed and looking at every place I can and trying to find ways to gratify, some of my dark desires, that's not on them, bro. It's on you. Like, this is one of the ways where purity culture has really gotten sideways on us over the time, and no one ever, I shouldn't say no one ever, but like, it just sort of became acceptable. And then something extreme like happens, like the shoot up in Atlanta, and then it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
This is the end result of that, at a kind of further down the road level. Now, okay, so this is clearly wrong. What happened in the steps leading up to that should have been different?
That's right.
A lot of things.
Go real quick, going along with this idea of like the prosperity gospel. I can speak from experience, this idea of, not in the money piece of it, but like if you do all things right, then good things will happen as a Christian family. For us, the darkest times of our marriage came from this time where, I don't know if you probably don't know this, but my wife and I have infertility. We can't have kids naturally, so both of our sons are adopted. But for a long time it was this: if you do things right, if you do the right things, you grow up, you get married, you have kids, you're happily ever after, that kind of thing. And for us, for the first, I don't know, we've been married 15 years now. For the first at least 8 years of our marriage, it was this thing of like, you do the right thing, you're gonna have kids. You just got to trust Jesus. You got to trust Jesus. If you trust Jesus, you're gonna have. You're going to have babies. He's going to give you everything you want. And for us, the damage was we pushed all our chips in, we believed with all of our heart, God's going to give us a kid. If we have enough faith, if I had $1 for every time somebody prophesied over us, this time God's telling me this time next year, you're going to have a baby. You're going to carry,
You've had that happen?
Have I had it happen? It happened for 8 years. I bet, I don't know, 200-300 times people just come and prophesy over us. God's telling me, I just hear it right now. you're going to have a baby this time next year. Right. And so for us, like, we put all of our chips on the table. And when that ace wasn't dealt, we lost it all.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Mentally,
dude, that's so
emotionally,
rough.
Sure.
and I mean, we've talked about this, but I mean, there was a point where, with us, it wasn't that our marriage was over. We knew it was over. We were just trying to figure out how to tell the family, and like, it came from that place of, you do things right, this is what happens. And then when
So
something,
damaging.
and 100% it was damaging. And I think that kind of idea can really jack somebody
Oh,
up.
it really can. But this is another area that I feel optimistic about things. Is I'm sensing that, I guess you could call it true Christianity, or actually following the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords in your life at any cost. Because, Ben, I'll tell you this much right now. Storms are going to come. And what you want when storms come is you're going to need a bedrock. And the only true bedrock you can completely rely on when all of the shit hits the fan, all of it, it's Christ.
That's right.
Like, that is the bedrock that you're going to need in your life.
Yep.
And so those storms are going to come, and that's going to happen. And one of the areas that I feel optimistic about is I sort of sense, thankfully, a greater disconnect between cultural norms and true Christianity.
Yeah.
Like, you can actually be let me just put a really fine point on this. You can actually be a Bible believing, Jesus loving, kingdom of God serving Christian and vote Democratic.
Yeah.
That can actually happen. You can have different cultural beliefs and be a follower of Christ and his ways. And I feel like we're growing in that area.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing, because for too long, Christianity was tied to these cultural norms where if you didn't follow these cultural norms, then you must not have been a Christian. And now it's sort of like, and by the way, you can vote Republican too. You can vote independent. I mean, so now it's more about, like, some of that stuff is getting burnt away. Mm-hmm. And then you either follow Christ or you don't. Like, that's kind of the bigger decision now. And some of the cultural stuff is you can have different beliefs around some of that cultural stuff.
Back to the purity culture thing, because that culture, I grew up steeped in that, and I wrote my blog as, when I wrote it, one of the motivations was to try to bring some truth to, to speak the truth about what effect that had in my life, and how it's like the benefits that it purported to bring, it not only didn't bring, it brought about some version of hell instead for me. And I ended up being, addicted to porn and living out this terrible hellish story for, the first 15 years of my marriage, 17 years. And, it's like, it seems to me now, looking back, like that was the product of a generation who was a generation of men who were unwilling, or maybe we're blind, either willfully or otherwise, and we're unwilling to do the work to really look at what's going on inside of their own hearts as it relates to beauty and the feminine, and and allow themselves to be confronted by feminine beauty, and because beauty is a judge, because beauty judges everything that's not beautiful. And feminine beauty does that maybe maximally. And so that can, when we're confronted with a judge, we have a choice to make. We can either allow ourselves to go through the transformational death and resurrection to become the kind of person who gazes at beauty and allows it to change him in a positive way, allows it to serve as a positive motivation to grow into more of the man that you ought to be, or you try to put walls up around the part of your heart that you don't want to allow to be changed, and to instead use that and subvert it in some ways. And I think, the purity culture was a part of a Christian culture that took the whole grand narrative of Scripture, the grand story of God's renewal on earth, bringing heaven to earth, and the beautiful story of God pulling his people out and creating a people that know him and follow him and walk with him, and he is with them, and he is living in them, and they are the temple of the holy living God. Like, that's the story, and we participate with him in the renewal of all things and bringing about the kingdom of heaven on earth. Like, that's a grand story. And for much of the 20th century, the church collapsed that story into this narrow little kind of formula.
Yes.
Checking these boxes to achieve post-mortem salvation, to avoid some barbecue at the end of time or at the end of life. And it's like, well, if you collapse the story down into that, then you damn well better be right about all this stuff, and you better get everything right. And it requires this totalitarian view and this kind of locking down of our hearts and locking down of desire and locking down of fear, and lock it all down and create a system that's airtight and delivers us, into, once we get out of this, earth, and then we can go to heaven, finally be free.
Yeah. And everyone else can burn in hell.
Right. Instead of doing the hard work of bearing our cross and making Jesus Christ manifest in our lives day to day, right here, being confronted with beauty, being confronted with malevolence and evil and sickness and, the floods that inevitably come, and still going through the death and resurrection to be required to live victoriously and make Jesus manifest on earth in our communities and in our families. It's like, we missed it for so long. Dude. And the purity culture is a powerful, powerful part of that little collapse of that narrative. And now I'm so thankful because it's burning away. Like you said, people are starting to see that it's insufficient. That's why I think we're in this kind of post-church Western world, right? That story didn't end up providing the kind of, animating power and narrative sense that people need to live properly in the world. And it's like, that's why when you look at the populations of people in that story and in the world, if you will, the levels of divorce and the levels of anxiety and the levels of obesity and the levels of, you name the illness, it's like, they're about the same, right? There's the human flourishing that can come from actually living out the Jesus narrative. And I'm not talking about prosperity gospel. I'm talking about shalom in your home. I'm talking about true peace in your heart kind of flourishing. It was not really part of the story for much of the modern 20th century church in the West.
Well, what you described is a really good way to manipulate behavior and an ineffectual way to change hearts.
No kidding.
Yeah. 100%.
Another area.
So I'm so optimistic with you. Yeah. I am optimistic because we're all sitting here saying that's bullshit.
Dude, and Patrick, Mark said this a couple thousand years ago. I was just reading the other day. I think it's chapter 4. Evil does not come from without. It comes from within. Dude, this has been in the Bible since we've been reading it and trying to follow its ways. It's right there.
Yeah.
How can we get it so wrong? But there's lots of ways to get it so wrong. I was just talking with Jeremy Newsom the other day, and I don't think his is out yet either, but he was a Jehovah's Witness. I think they kind of changed their name to Church of the Latter-day Saints now. They're kind of rebranding it.
Latter-day Saints is Mormon, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay, but they rebranded to something.
JW?
LDS?
LDS.
What's LDS stand for?
Latter-day Saints.
But you're
Okay,
talking
so that's
Jehovah's
Mormon,
Witness.
but I was talking about Jehovah's Witness is called... Jehovah's Witness is rebranding. They don't like to be called Jehovah's Witness anymore. Whatever it is, I thought it was a Church of the Latter-day Saints, but maybe I have that incorrect. But what I didn't know is that they're okay with my ESV version of the Bible I have in my backpack over there. They read the Bible. They're okay with that. I mean, they sort of have their pet translations that they like better, but they're okay with anyone's version of the Bible. So let's not think, Patrick, that like in the cultures we might have grown up in, or any culture for that matter, just because you say you're following the Bible, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're following the root narrative and story and heart change that book is actually trying to convey. I mean, it just seems clear to me that it's the Holy Scripture has spoken about this. Evil does not come from without; it comes from within. So you can protect yourself all you want, but until Christ takes a hold of that heart, that thing is black.
Yeah.
And it's going to serve wrong motivations. So it just backs up what you're saying about, you know, this thing was a good way to manipulate behavior and a bad way to change hearts.
Yeah. And but back to your point about the next generation, you know, Ben and, you know, our 3 other children, and like we sit and talk about this stuff, and not only do they hear it, they talk about it and they know it at some deep level. Like it's not, I mean, they get it. Like we talk about it all the time, and they see, well, first of all, my kids, you know, have had a front row seat to me, you know, my life falling apart and me putting it, you know, following Christ, falling in love with Christ and following him and my life being reoriented completely. And so like that has given them that insight into maybe the true nature of what it means to, you know, follow Jesus instead of just this check these boxes so I don't go to hell kind of Christianity. And so I am really optimistic about where, well, first of all, not only I'm deeply optimistic because I see the whole story, and that is that the Church of Jesus Christ is growing in influence. It's growing in power. I have a friend in China who works for the Chinese government in a college. She's a doctor. She's a professor in college. And she has an underground kindergarten where she teaches children about Jesus. She's happy, she's thriving, she's flourishing, and the church there is filled with power and growing all the time. And it's because I see the actual narrative arc of God's work in the world, which is a restorative renewal work that will culminate in the full realization of Jesus Christ as King and ruling and reigning.
And that is the true gospel. And I think it was on the way home from you guys' house a while ago that Marianne and I were talking about that, is like, and this is one of the things I think maybe C.S. Lewis said, but it's basically the point that the gospel is the most multicultural thing you're going to get. Like there's lots of other religions. If you want to believe them, it's fine, but you have to dress a certain way. You have to talk a certain way. You have to act a certain way. But the gospel is the most multicultural, multi-ethnic thing out, like the religion, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, out there. Like, you know, when you find other people on that path that are actually like following Jesus, it might be a low 40s guy who went through turmoil in his life and God got a hold of him and like awakened his heart. It might be that. It might be an Amish business owner. It might be the Chinese lady that is working for the Chinese government. It might, you name it. It might be
everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's infecting those people, and it's causing a true heart change.
If we tune into it,
but when you meet those people and talk with them, it's like, oh, we're talking the same language here, sort of. But it's an underground sort of language. It's not like, oh, I get it because you look just like me, or you act just like me, or you talk just like me, or you dress just like me. It's not even that anymore. It's like when you see the change in their heart, like that's what you resonate with, and that's super encouraging, actually.
My old order Amish boss and we have that connection that you just talked about.
That's what I'm talking
we
about.
We get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're following the same Jesus.
Well, I want to give you guys an early evening at 7:00 already.
Is it?
On a Thursday night.
It's about as good a place to end as I can think of.
Yeah, it is. Thank you guys for being my friends. Thank you guys for sharing your hearts and your experiences and your beliefs. I mean, this is what we're trying to do in the podcast. And now we hit episode 100. I mean, this is
Can I
episode
just take a
100
moment to just point out what a remarkable accomplishment that is?
Yeah.
100 episodes. There's not a lot of that kind of stick-with-itness around us anymore. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Very
you kept
much.
showing up.
Thank you.
Here's to 100 more.
100 more, man. And I think this is kind of one of those things where it's like, this doesn't make any financial sense at all. This doesn't justify itself from a time standpoint at all. And right now, I don't care, man. I love doing this. And if someone, sometimes can get value out of it, then it's time well spent. you know?
Amen.
I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, this is an activity that's congruent with who I am. Can I justify it financially? No. Can I justify it as an ROI on my time? I don't know. Not really. Maybe. I mean, I've met a lot of really great people in this. And this is one of the things that has stood out to me from having like 100 people sit around this table, or well, more than 100 people, because right now there's 4 of us, but 100 different times, is like everyone's gone through some shit. Everyone has. And everyone maybe to some extent is right now. And that's okay. You know, that's one of the things that stood out to me, is how human actually every human is.
And more than just okay, I think it's beneficial to hear that, right? I think it's to me, I found more encouragement when I'm in conversations and having moments of vulnerability and being like, hey, guess what? You can deal with shit just like I deal with. Look, I think that going back kind of full circle, I think for me, most of my life, I wanted to have this idea of like, I'm the perfect kid, or we're the perfect people, or we got it all figured out. No one has it figured out. And I think that when you continue to surround yourself with people that you can be vulnerable with, even if in a micro way, you know, maybe it's not a super deep level, but even in those micro ways of being like, hey, I know what you're going through. I've dealt with it. You know, I made it on the other side, or maybe I'm still in it. Maybe I'm in the beginning of it. I think that those kinds of conversations is what impacts people more than, listen to me. And
I totally agree. And I think too, like, I mean, I've said this before, it's not original with me, but like our biggest battles are fought between our ears. And we don't get a bunch of feedback on every single episode, but I have gotten some feedback where it's like, that was helpful. Thank you. And so I'm just hopeful that some of these conversations can spark some hope or some change, or some helpful bit of information that can help someone that we never hear about, you know. But
I've heard that. I've had people come up to me and tell me they heard something on your podcast that helped them tremendously.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's like, man, you know, if we can keep doing that, then mission accomplished.
Amen.
So, well, brothers, I love you guys very much.
Thank you.
I
really do. I'm not just saying that. I appreciate you guys.
I'm glad we actually got to spend a little bit of time together,
Absolutely.
even if it's behind a mic.
We'll have to do that again.
Yeah. But I think that for a listener, like if someone's listening and they're sensing like, well, geez, you know, Kent has an actual deep, strong relationship with these two guys and they're his brothers, that is true. Mm-hmm. And if they feel like they're missing that in their life, dude, I get it. I have missed that too at some points. And I have plenty of room for more of that in my life. Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, I've got lots of room for growth in areas of deep relationships and community. But if someone's listening and they're just thinking, man, you know, I'm just never going to have that, then I would just say, dude, you know, keep pushing forward. Like you can have that one day. This is not above your reach.
No.
It may not necessarily be like conveyed on a podcast, but that's 100% besides the point.
Yeah.
Like our connection wasn't made on this podcast.
That's right.
You know, I mean, now we're getting to have this great conversation because I already knew you guys and like, but it's out there. Like if someone's missing it, I feel really sorry for them. You know, it sucks. It sucks to feel alone in this world. It sucks to feel like you don't have someone you can really be honest with, even one person, or better yet, 3 or 6, you know, it really does suck. But that doesn't need to be the verdict on the rest of their life.
That's
you
right.
know?
100%.
My encouragement to those of you who are listening, who may find yourself in that situation where you feel lonely, you feel disconnected. I think that's pretty big. I think that's a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I want to encourage you, because this is a conviction that I'm experiencing now, is that connection comes from contribution, not from consumption.
Yeah.
And we're in a consumption culture. We consume. We scroll Instagram, we scroll TikTok, we consume, contribution requires something of us that provides that opportunity for vulnerability, you know, where it's like, I'm sharing my time, you're sharing your time. And together we're sharing our time together, and we're contributing our stories, contributing our pain, and confessing to our weaknesses, our sins. and we're being renewed in that, and that is a necessary part of community, of being together, is that vulnerability.
Yeah.
So that would be my encouragement.
And
too.
you know what? Just to go with you, Kit, and I want to just say I appreciate you too. Like the beauty of this podcast is, I know in our relationship, I don't feel like I've ever been in a position where I feel like, you know what, Kent's having time with me because he wants something from me, right? I mean, I think the people that I'm closest to, you have that sense. And to go to what you were saying, you know, contributing into people's lives of really caring and saying like, hey, I really do love this person. I love you. Let me pour into your life. I think that really matters. And I think that's where that sense of true community comes from, of you don't have an agenda. I'm not wanting something from you. People can sniff out bullshit. You know, if you're coming to them to ultimately gain something from them, they're going to tell. They're going to know.
That's a low level energy, and people pick that up.
100%.
I agree. And I'll say too, before we wrap this up, is like we have listeners that listen to this that do not believe in the God that we believe in, and that's super okay. And I would just say, like, if you're listening to this and are like, man, I kind of feel like I kind of hear what they're saying about like this desire, like this inward knowing, like as a human of like, why are we here? What's going on? Where's this all going? And so I like have some needs in that area, but man, I don't know about all this other stuff that goes along with the Christian faith religion. We should probably talk, because we might not be into that other stuff too. You know what I mean? Don't let some of that other stuff be a barrier, because as it turns out, there might be a lot of us that aren't into that stuff too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Let me close us in prayer. Is that okay?
I'd love that.
Go for it.
Let's pray. God, thank you for Ben Miller. Thank you for Allen Dixon. Thank you for Patrick Miller. Thank you for Kobe Miller. And thank you for these brothers that mean so much. And thank you for 100 episodes in this podcast. We'd love 100 more, but we leave that into your care. And we ask you to direct us, and we love you. Amen.
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 All right, guys. Thanks for being on.